Hi there, and welcome to another episode of English Chat here at Talking About Testing. Today I am here with Scott. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you doing, man?
Good, good. Thanks for being back. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, exactly. You've been here a while ago, and I'm super glad you accepted the invitation to be here again. And today the idea is that we'll talk about something that many people that listen to my YouTube channel might find maybe a bit weird because this channel is called Talking About Testing, and we talk about testing. And most of the audience of the Talking About Testing channel are testers or quality assurance engineers or however you want to call them. But there are also developers that watch the my channel as well. And you are a front end developer. And the idea is that we'll talk about development teams without dedicated QAs, because when we were chatting on WhatsApp, you mentioned that this is something you have experienced, right?
Yeah, yeah. When me and you, so I've experienced it a few times actually, and then um, at GitLab was one of the first times that we had. That's how we met. Is we had a dedicated QA team as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so
Can,
I,
can I interrupt you just for a moment to say two things? One, I want you to speak a little bit loudly, and the
oh,
second
sorry.
one is that before we get started talking about the subject, I want you to introduce briefly to our audience here.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Scott. Me and Walmir work together at GitLab. I've been a front end engineer in Silicon Valley, remote, last about 10 years. And then, yeah, I've seen quite a bit of what goes on in the engineering community.
Okay, now you can continue. So you were mentioning that GitLab was the first place where you worked, where there were dedicated testers, right?
Yeah, I can, I want to say it's the only place, but it was also one of the only places that the engineers had so much responsibility
Hmm.
on the products that they develop. So in this conversation, I'm really excited to talk to you about like engineering responsibility and quality assurance, and then a quality assurance team. And then we can also, if we want, talk about like maybe someone on this podcast will listen that's a business owner, and they're like, "Well, do I need a QA team?"
Yeah,
So we can
yeah.
talk about the different
And I
levels.
think it's important because you mentioned that at GitLab, like I was a dedicated QA. Uh, Actually, at GitLab, I think we were called software engineers in test or something like that, or software development engineers in test. I don't remember exactly the term. But at the same time, the developers themselves were already responsible for writing lots and lots of automated tests themselves, right?
Yeah, totally. Um, and back to the accountability thing, it was an interesting situation because as developers, we used GitLab to build GitLab.
Yeah.
So usually at a company, so we call it dog fooding, where
Hmm.
you use the product on a daily
That you built.
basis. Um, so that gave, I think, there was an easier path for the business for to make the case that engineers would have responsibility. It was natural. Where
Hmm.
if you work at a company and you do software for doctors and you're not a doctor because you're building software, it's harder to empathize. So then
Yeah.
the accountability goes away. Like the empathy, I think, goes away a little bit, and then you really have to rely on the QA team even more. So
I think
yeah,
that's a really good point, fair point. Like, since we were developing a software for software engineers to use, we were the the personas, right, that we were writing the software for,
right,
and
right, right.
so we would know exactly what they would expect because we are them as well, right? the
Yeah,
other way
100%.
around, if you were, as you just mentioned, building a software for a subject that you are not an expert. But even in this case, I would wonder, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it, because my view is that independently of the software that you are building, it is possible to have high quality software delivery without dedicated testers. Of course, you would have to have very good software developers, software engineers that would know not only their technical stack, but also they would have to know a lot about the business. And I think this is something that is important independent of the software that you are building. Because if you don't know who are the people that are going to use your software, you're probably not going to build the right thing, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think so it's 100% possible. GitLab's a very unique situation for a developer. Unless you're in
Mm.
developer tools or you switched careers, like I don't know, you were an accountant and now you're building accounting software.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to find those roles, but it's not impossible. I think the engineering team and the business need to put emphasis on customer empathy. I think that's the piece that's usually missing when QA goes down.
Mm.
Um, like if I work on a software for accountants and I've never done a tax return or I've never sat with them and watched them struggle or had the struggle myself, I'm not going to have the empathy to build quality software. I think
Perfect.
that's a big I think that's the thing that usually gets missed because it is important, but it's not top of mind. Like, oh, we got to make more money. And then how do you do that? Make more sales. And then how do you and then, oh, engineering, build this thing. When you can do a lot of good by just taking a step back, feeling the pain
Yeah.
and like as rudimentary as this sounds, like checking your work. Like,
Yeah.
right? Even though you're not like at GitLab, I had to check my work because I'm using the thing and it's like, I broke it.
Yeah.
But like I want to make sure that the thing I'm delivering does what I expect and I really push it. Like, okay, uh just try and take 10 minutes, load it up on production, try and hit every corner case you can think of.
Mm.
You're going to catch things. And that's okay. Like we can't think of everything.
Yeah.
Um,
One
but
thing that I wanted to explore here with you, because sometimes I hear people that are dedicated QAs or testers saying that developers can think as a tester, which I don't agree, because I have worked with many software engineers, front end developers, back end developers, full stack developers who were really, really, really good testers. So I wanted to hear your perspective on that. What are your thoughts?
so hmm, yeah, I think it like you pointed out, it's a different mindset.
Hmm.
Uh, I think I think why having a dedicated QA team is one of the reasons why it's amazing is, and if this isn't the right mindset you're talking about, correct me, but they look at the problem differently,
Hmm.
right? Almost like someone that's trying to hack into a system,
Yeah.
where I'm being pressured to build things or fix bugs from a business perspective, where I think that jades you a little bit, and then you don't really think through, oh, how is this going to be affected? And then you have the tester come in and they know, even a new engineer, like especially a new engineer in a new company that doesn't maybe know the domain as well,
Hmm.
the QA team is going to be able to push it and be like, oh, I caught this. It's like, oh, great, thanks. So yeah, I think I don't think they can do the same job. Like, I don't think a software engineer can just be a QA engineer as well. That's too much to do. But I do think that the software engineer needs to have that hat that they have to put on at the end of the process for accountability. Because like we're supporting each other in a role, but I need to think through the problem, solve the problem, validate that it solved the problem, and then you're also thinking through the automation side. So there's the manual
Mm-hmm.
QA, right? Like go through it, and then you're automating that process and like highest value. So you have
Yeah.
to
So
understand the business.
yeah, there are two things you touched upon that I wanted to explore a bit more. So one of them is you talked about collaboration between QA and development, and so the first thing I want to explore is that. Do you think it's possible for a developer to get insights on being a better QA or a better tester by working or by collaborating with a QA? Because at the first time you may not have thought about the specific scenario to automate, and then the QA thought about it, and then you realized, I could have done this myself. And then the next time something similar might come, you might remember that. So you are depending less on someone else thinking for you. And the other thing I want to explore is about manual QA versus automated QA, because this is something that I believe that manual QA is important for some stuff, but for most of the stuff, we can automate things. And I think if we don't, we are creating a huge bottleneck. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about these two subjects,
Sure. Which one do you want to start with?
the one you prefer.
Let's talk about
So the first
manual
one,
versus auto.
yeah, okay.
Um, so I don't think a lot of people think this way, but I think it's important. Tests are an asset and a liability. And the more, so if you're not careful how you write your tests, even a developer writing unit tests, the cost of maintenance goes up. The value that it provides goes up or down depending on the path. So I really value having manual QAs. Systems go down. You upgrade a tool like Cypress and selector breaks. That's a breaking change, but maybe something snuck in, right? So you have to, the way I like to think about it is like, if we have 0 tests, automation wise, what is the highest, the most valuable happy path for our business that needs to be automated? Because
Okay.
I want to know if it breaks before it breaks in production. And then you keep having that mindset. Okay, like I don't think it's healthy to say I'm just going to automate everything, because then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I got to maintain this test, and then
At least not at the end-to-end level, right? I
right,
mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So having even the developer manually QAing the thing, because how many times does CI go down or your development pipeline go down, and maybe you need to release?
mhm.
Well, you got to manually QA it. And if you don't know the path and you don't know how to do that and you don't know why you do that, then you're just relying on a tool too heavily. So there's a balance. Yeah, and did at GitLab did the QA team manually QA, or was their job just to take, because did we have a manual QA team, or was that just on the developers?
uh, so we would do exploratory testing when needed, when required by the team developing something, but mostly we would be actually we were creating a test automation framework and other tools for the development teams to consume and alleviating them when they didn't have enough time to do that themselves. We would help them writing the tests as well. and making sure the infrastructure that runs the tests, the pipelines, they would be always up and running and that kind of stuff. But I would say that manual testing would be more in the exploratory side and not following a script, you know.
Got it. Got it. What was the first question?
The other
There's two.
one was about learning from the QA by collaborating
Oh,
and
right.
depending less on a QA because you are collaborating. Because in my previous job, when I was working for Typeform, for instance, we didn't have any dedicated QAs. We had hundreds of developers, and we had just four quality assistant software engineers. So we were assisting teams in quality matters. So for some teams, it would mean we would create some tooling for them to do visual regression testing. For others, would be helping them on think through the scenarios that should be covered. And so different teams would have different needs. Um, and I can say that I worked with developers that were so great at automating or thinking about the scenarios because they had this kind of coaches working together with them. So I want to explore
Mm.
this side of the coin with you.
Did you feel so? Before I answer, how did you like that versus the GitLab scenario?
Mm, it was a very different scenario, and the most difficult part is that for me, writing automated tests is super cool. And when I can't do that because the developers are doing that so much better than I would, it feels kind of weird. But at the same
Mm.
time, it opened me the chance to look into other aspects of the quality. So, for instance, in terms of reducing costs, so we were doing visual regression testing with a paid service that was quite costly for the company. So we were looking into open source alternatives that we could host in our own infrastructure and replace the SaaS thing from our own to reduce costs for the company. This is something that we have done. So I think when that kind of scenario happens, you have to open your mind to other possibilities. That was
Mm.
like because if I can't code, I would be sad. So I had to find other things. And this is why I think software testers they might not exist anymore after a while, or just a few companies will still hire people just to do the testing, while software development engineers in test, which will be building tools for developers to test better, will keep existing.
Mm. Interesting. So to answer your original question, um, just because I'm getting better at something doesn't mean like that means that the longer I'm at a company, the more I understand the product, the less I would rely on QA.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think of it like if you put your business owner hat on, that doesn't mean I should be good at that. I should know how to think about it, but is my highest value catching those things? Because like you have a CEO that has a company.
Mhm.
At the beginning, he does sales, and then he has a sales team because he can't be doing sales anymore. That's not his highest value thing. So these skills complement each other. Like in terms of return, the software developer and test, it might not make sense for them to do front end work.
Yeah.
They might need you sometimes, but it just doesn't like make sense for the business and for them because it's a skill. So yes, I might have context over time, but that also puts a single point of failure on me, the developer. What if I get a new job and you have to hire a new person? Those things are documented in scripts, but it's like I think they're very important to work together. Like a good enough engineer that understands the business could probably do product management.
Yeah.
Should they? Probably
I think
not.
it really depends on the size of the company, because if we are talking about enterprise with hundreds of engineers, it's surely impossible for one person to do the whole thing, right? At the other side, if we are talking about a small startup
Yeah, totally.
that has, 10, 20 engineers, they would have to wear different hats. And sometimes they would
Totally.
be working on infrastructure, sometimes in building front end, sometimes back end,
Yeah.
sometimes testing. So I think it really depends on the context of where we are. So let's change gears a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your experience working in development teams that have no dedicated QAs or testers. Who is responsible for writing the automated tests? Do you do automated tests? If you do so, what kind of automated tests you write? Is it just in unit testing? Is it from unit testing to integration to end to end? What kind of tools you use, not only
Yeah.
for testing, but for continuous integration and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So when I don't have a QA team, um, there's like it's not popular anymore. I still think it's very relevant, but you have the testing pyramid. So you have the unit integration end to end. And then people have made popular this trophy. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I see its place. Um, so kind of back to what we talked about, and someone we worked with at GitLab was had a large part in mentoring me through this kind of mindset. I want to, if a bug goes out, I want to have the fastest feedback that a bug was created. So
Yeah,
what is that fastest feedback would be in a unit test, right? If I have a function that adds two things together, if I break that, I want to know immediately. Okay.
yeah,
Then you have the integration of that into maybe the add function into a calculator. Okay. So now you'll have less integration tests, but depending on the importance, we'll have some. And then at the end, we'll have end-to-end tests on the happy path of the feature.
okay,
And then tools, React testing library, um, uh, Enzyme not anymore, Cypress, and then at GitLab we used Capybara and other Ruby solutions.
hmm
So a lot of the emphasis is on the developer. I It's hard. I think the hardest thing for the developer is the like understanding the path. I think is easy because the you built the feature.
hmm
The harder part of that on new features is knowing where in the stack to build the test
mm
and the best solution for the test to be automated. There's a lot of times like there's a lot of times people write end-to-end tests like, oh, this component rendered this thing. You can do that at a unit level.
yeah,
Uh, and then the other thing I'll say is if you come into a legacy code base, there's going to be tech debt and features that aren't tested.
yeah,
It's really, really hard for me to step in and have confidence that what I'm doing isn't going to break a change. So if we deem that this is important, not having a QA team to confirm that I didn't break anything is really hard. Um, so then you have to do it's called like a philosophy of this is called a pinning test. You essentially have to like reverse engineer the feature, write a
yeah,
bunch of tests for it, and hope you don't break anything. Um, and when you have 50 tickets and a ton of pressure, you know,
yeah.
sometimes it's just you do your best.
So let's talk about something else that just came to my mind, which would be you are in the situation where you have a legacy system that had no tests at all. Um, and then you have to keep maintaining it, adding new features, but you don't want to break it. So you would probably start adding some tests for the most important parts. So you would know that if you change something and something breaks, you get immediate feedback before pushing it to production. Uh, but what I want to explore is on the testability part. So you had no testability in the beginning, and then you started to build tests to allow you to keep growing the software, right? What do you think it's possible to change from a non-testable application to a testable application over time by having that in mind, that if you don't do that, it's just slow you down even more?
That's a really good question. I think the most answers in this industry is it depends. Uh, I see a lot of, if you have a product or if you have a business that's not engineering forward, like led by engineering,
Mhm.
a lot of times it's hard to get the buy-in to say, I need time, because the testing return is out. It's not, it can be immediate, but it's kind of like lights on. It's like DevOps, right? It's like, I expect the app
What
to
do you mean
work.
by lights on it? Because my view is that it might slow you down in the beginning, but it
Yeah.
will make you
Yes. Yes.
faster at the
Yes.
long
In the,
run, and the long run might not be as far as you imagine. And the
yep.
opposite is also true. If you don't pay attention to that kind of stuff, it will make you faster in the beginning, and then it will slow you down until you can't add
Yep.
a
Do
new
anything.
button to the application because everything else will break. So
So
my
that's a great point.
my view is from an investment
Yep.
point of view.
So 100% on the same page. Let me rephrase. It's hard to convince how non-technical people view this
Mhm.
is lights on. Forget about QA. They're like, the app should just work. The amount of work it takes for that to happen is a huge investment.
Yeah.
Even if I say the page is slow, I need to invest time in investigating performance and refactoring. If you
Mhm.
have a non-technical business, like product management side, they're like, it should just be fast. Why didn't you do that the first time? Right? Like these types of things. So the how it sounds, I guess how the business side, which is very important, views this kind of thing is just lights on, and it's not. The question was, is it possible to incrementally improve a code base over time to
Yeah.
become testable? I think it is, as long as you can get buy-in
Yeah.
from non-technical stakeholders that this is important. This is an important investment.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So with that in mind, have you been in a situation like that? And if so, how do you make people to buy in?
yeah, yeah. Um, Not directly with tests, but
It doesn't
technical
need to be with
topics like,
tests. It can be
yeah,
with performance. It can be with
yeah,
whenever you think
yeah.
it's relevant.
Yeah, I've been in that situation a lot. And how do you get buy-in? It's a really good question. We could have a 3-hour conversation on that. Um, it's essentially sales. Like you have to
Yeah.
become a salesperson. And we talked about accountability and pain, right? User empathy comes through pain.
Yeah.
So I think you need to show them the pain.
Yeah.
If that doesn't happen, for example, we need to think about performance. Business says it's fine. Okay. 2 days later, your largest customer comes to you and says, we're pulling our contract
Yeah.
if you don't make it performant. That's huge pain. They go, do whatever you need to do. So it's not good to have that. But if measurement, can you measure like how many bugs were reported in a period of time, incrementally improved tests, can we reduce that?
Yeah.
Because you have like your severity, Sev 1, Sev 2, Sev 3, Sev 4, whatever.
Mhm.
So if you're at a startup and your company, the CEO is freaking out because you have a ton of Sev 1s, there's your lever to say,
Yeah.
I can make these go away.
Yeah.
And this is how.
Yeah.
And obviously,
And
like
then you
you
have to
said,
prove it after a while, right?
exactly, then you have to prove it. So it's the base measurement, change, remeasurement,
Yeah.
etc. Like that's so this is interesting. Let's talk about manual QA for a second.
Mhm.
If you're in that situation, if you have 10 Sev 1s a month, but your developers aren't actually checking their work on production, you should have tests 150%, but you could mitigate a lot of that risk by just manually QAing your own work and
Mhm.
saying, is it on production? Did it work? Or did the page crash? You could reduce them by half. So it's thinking like, okay, what can I do to make the change? Is it an automated test? Is it a manual process? Like, because me and you we can go into any company and spend a year just writing automations, but is that actually providing value? It can have some value,
Mhm.
but identifying the buy-in thing is identifying the pain, showing them, measuring, change,
Perfect.
measure, improvement.
That's perfect. Yeah. Mm. Is there anything you would like to ask me? I'm doing all the questions here.
Yeah, yeah. Where do you think? So I have a YouTube channel. I talk about a bunch of different things.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's gonna be here in the description, by the way. And you that are watching should listen to all Scott's advice. I've been listening to them, and they are great.
Thank you. Um, a lot of people that have been reaching out to me are saying how tough of a market it is to get
Mhm.
jobs, which I don't disagree with.
Yeah.
Where with your students, where's their either biggest fear? You mentioned like, oh, well, developers can just do this job. We're not going to be needed. Kind of the fears that people in your audience are having.
Okay. I would say some of them they fear that if they don't know how to automate, they won't be able to get into the industry, which might be true in many cases because automation is something that is being required more and more over time. This is why I teach them automation so they can have higher chances of getting their job. Some people also fear that they won't be needed anymore if they keep just doing testing. And this is one of the motives I brought you here to talk about that kind of stuff because it's like myself, for instance. I started working with software testing 20 years ago. And when I
Mhm.
started, I was a manual tester. And after a while, I got bored of doing manual testing and I started learning about automation. And when I learned about automation, I started understanding that if I want to automate the things at the right level, I have to know more than just black box testing. I have to know about the intrinsics of the application. So some people fear that that even just automation might not be enough, that they might have to start learning more about front end, about back end. And I totally think if you do so, it will increase your chances of success. Let me see if I can think of anything else. One of these days, a guy sent me a message saying, "Should I continue focusing on being a tester or should I try development?" And I told him, "That's your decision to make. It's not mine. Like if you like to do development, why not to try?" And then you can decide if you were gonna continue or if you were gonna do something different, right? But I think that the most fear people have is that manual testing is gonna be over, and like I can tell you, I have worked as a manual tester for quite a while, and nowadays I see less and less companies hiring people just for manual testing. You still see
Mhm.
some positions open just for manual testing, but most of them require you to do automation as well. And well, people fear artificial intelligence as well. And I don't fear. I see it as a partner, as something that
Yeah.
can make me think on things that I would not be thinking. So I use AI for many different stuff. But yeah, I think those are the main things that come to my mind.
That's interesting. It's very similar, I think, in any industry where you're taking a chance. You're investing you're investing time, whether it be in software development or testing, to improve your situation or to get a job, right?
And let me interrupt
So,
you for a moment because you just said something that made me think of something else, which is, in my opinion, software development and software testing, if we are talking about automation, is just the same thing because
mhm,
automated tests are software that tests other software. And this is something that I try to teach the people that follow me. You have to think as software testing as software development, which means that you have to care about the software, the scripts that you are writing. You have to think about testability. You have to think about the design of what you're writing. You have to think about the readability of the tests that you are writing. You have to think about the maintenance of what you are doing because you are not the only one who is going to touch that piece of code. Some more people will have to understand. And you might think, oh, this is easy to understand. But if you think it's easy and the other people think it's hard, it's not easy at all. So I just wanted to mention that because I think
it's
they are both the same thing, but applied to different contexts.
totally. And I like what you said. It's the principles are the skills you develop, like to your followers. If you're like, should I do software testing or development? If you've been working with Walmir, still do testing.
Yep.
You might get your first job as a quality assurance tester, and they need, hey, I would like to take a front end ticket. Go for it. But at
Yep.
least you've built the skill and investment to make the shift. Like it's the principles are the same.
I heard one of these days a podcast that was talking exactly about this. Like, if you think you are not learning anymore by doing what you're doing, try something more challenge, and then you will grow. You will learn more, and then you will not only be able to do more stuff than you were able to do before, but the things that you were able to do before maybe will improve. You will do them better.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. It's all so if this is your break into the software community, some of the best engineers I've worked with were testers first
Mm.
and then got an opportunity to work on a team as a developer. And they are some of the best developers I've ever worked with. So if this is your shoe and go for it, like there's a ton of people learning software development struggling to get jobs. So you're going to struggle no matter what. Just pick the one you enjoy doing more, you know?
Yeah.
Um, that's really interesting. Um, how do you see what do you think if me and you started a company and you had full reign on QA, how would you structure the company and develop like the engineering team with QA?
You mean with QA, meaning having a dedicated QA team or having quality assurance as part of the process?
Whatever you want. The goal
So,
the goal is to have the best quality software.
yeah.
Like we have users, we have an engineering team, we're making money. You get to do whatever you want, and the goal is the highest quality software to be delivered.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would for sure push for not non-dedicated testers. I would push for what We had, for instance, a Typeform with like a quality assistant team that would assist developers for them to become testers independent. That was one of our goals. We want the developers to not need us anymore. And that is a path you have to go through. It's not something that you say, and now you are a developer and tester as well. No, it's something that you have to learn as anything in life, right? And it requires practice. So what I would do is, because if you build this from scratch, this mindset is part of the culture you are building. While if you say we are going to start with a development team and a testing team, it might be harder when you are growing to switch gears to say now we are all software engineers and we build high quality software. Um, More specific things that I would say is that you mentioned in the beginning the task pyramid. I would highly encourage to, I think software testing can help you design better code. What do I mean by that? If you do, for instance, test driven development, you are writing the test first to make it pass afterwards, and then, if needed, refactor it. This will help you develop very decoupled software, very easy to test software, and then you might not need that many end-to-end tests because the very small parts, they are very well tested. So I would push to this. Like, we have to. I read this book last year, highly recommended, A Philosophy of Software Design from John Osterhout. He's a teacher at Stanford for the CS course, and he teaches software design. And he teaches software design from the perspective of complexity. He says that our goal as software engineers is to reduce software complexity over time because it's increment. As more you build upon the software you already have, the more complex it becomes. The more complex it becomes, the slower it will be for you to continue building it. So if you think about reducing complexity over time, you are investing on making it fast to continue growing, right? So I would highly push to the lower level testing, unit testing for backend, component testing for front end, because then you wouldn't require, and I would push for DevOps practices, continuous integration, continuous delivery, testing in production, like some things that I have done in some of my previous jobs. Besides having unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing being part of the continuous integration process, meaning you create a pull request, you push to GitHub or GitLab, and then automate the test run to ensure that you haven't broken anything. And if you have broken, you have feedback, so you fix it before it goes live. At the same time, we would, if it all passed, then you send it for code review, then it's approved, it goes to production. You would run the tests, the most important tests against production, because the environment where you are running the tests, they are different. And you might catch something in production that you haven't catched before. And even if there's no change in production, you could do what is called synthetic testing, which is in a schedule. You would run every hour the tests just to see that everything is working. And if something is not working, you would send feedback. So I think I would really try modern practices of software engineering, which means, I mean, automated test is good, but if you have to say, Valmir, hit the play for me to see if something is wrong, then it's not optimal. And the other side, if the whole process is automated, then we gain a lot more, right? So yeah, I think I would try to push for what the elite companies are doing in terms of software development instead of what the majority are doing.
Totally. I love what you said about I don't practice test-driven development as it like at its core, like as a write the test, do the thing. But every time I have, it's a time investment that I haven't like committed. I haven't committed to it as like this is my role.
Mm.
But I think the biggest problem I see on front end, especially with the tooling and the integration testing and the testing trophy and all this stuff, is people write really complicated components with really complicated business logic and then go, I'm going to mount the component and I'm going to test everything. And it's like,
Yeah.
then a new developer comes in and is like, what is going on? As opposed to, what does this thing need to do? Write the test, build it. What does this thing need to do? Write the test, build it. How do they work together? Done. It's so much easier. It's
Yeah.
so much easier.
Yeah. Man, it's been awesome to chat with you once
You
again.
as well.
We are reaching the end of this episode here, so I wanted to thank you a lot for being here, and I wanted to leave some space to talk about your initiatives and to say a final message to our audience here. Thanks again.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've had the YouTube channel for a while. I'm trying, this is what my current goal is. I'm trying to create as much free content for people to get into software engineering as possible and to level up their careers. And then soon-ish, I want to start creating more content around for business owners that are not technical to think about the things that we've talked about. But if you have any questions, please reach out. For anyone listening, Walmir's the best. Listen to what he says and you'll get far.
Thank you.
And whatever you decide to do is going to be hard. So pick your hard. And if you like testing, keep doing it.
Thank you a lot, man. It was great having you here, and I hope to have you again. And I would love to be on your channel again as well. Have a good one.
Awesome.